So basically, Risto for Rosine and a second next year. We'll get rid of Hag. Reinhart for Levi and Kulik, and then Eichel for Tuck, Krebs, Oslin, and a 2023 second. Again, it's too early to tell because a lot of these guys are still prospects, but on paper, that looks pretty good to you.
Yeah. No, it's like that the return on those things, like it's so future dependent, right? Like that's
Sure.
That's the main thing. Like you're just you're just waiting to see how these guys develop, or what those guys can turn into if you trade them for bigger pieces. Like that's kind of the spot that they're in. Like they've refilled the minors with it. They refilled their prospect pipeline. I can't say the minors because some of these guys are still playing junior or college or whatever, but they've refilled the pipeline with that, which is good. But that's the tough part with hockey trades is that you can't always just like stamp a grade on it right away, or say like who won it or who lost it right away, unless it's it's an immediate like player for player. Guys that are in the NHL or
is it more like baseball trades? Would you involving prospects?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. Like it's a little bit like that, where you got to kind of wait it out to see how some of those guys turn out. Because certainly in the Sabres case, you got to wait to see how some of those, how these picks turn out, or where these guys go, or how far they go, or whatever. Because that was the whole reason you sent those guys out, was for futures. So. The only one I'd say that they've already won is the Risotalainen trade, just because taking him out of Buffalo and taking him out of your starting lineup for 20 to 25 minutes a night immediately made their defense a little bit better.
Oh yeah,
maybe a lot better, just because Risto, for all his physicality and everything that he does there, kind of took away from, or kind of added to reasons why it was good for them to move on from him. So that's the only trade I'm really comfortable with saying, like, yep, they won that one. I know everybody wants to say like, oh, they won the Eichel trade. It's like, well, let's wait and see on that one. Like, obviously getting Tuck is a huge win. Getting Krebs is a huge win. But, if Jack wins an MVP next season, or, wins the Art Ross or something, or wins the Richard Trophy or something like that, then it's like, all right, well, Vegas got what they wanted. So that's good for them. But
could still be a win-win though, maybe.
Oh yeah, it could definitely be a win-win. It doesn't have to be a win-lose. I mean, a lot of trades end up lose-lose,
Sure.
Zach Kassian for Cody Hodgson, that's a lose-lose trade. Like nobody won that trade. So
it feels like Tuck and Krebs make it a pretty good trade for Buffalo already.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's kind of dependent on Oslin. If Oslin comes on and eventually becomes a good NHL player, then it feels like it was a really good trade.
Yeah.
If he turns out to be, then it doesn't feel quite as good.
You can make the argument too that with the Eichel trade, that by sending him out of town, it was a net positive anyways, because the relationship was so fractured and broken, and that things were very toxic at that point between Eichel and the team. And I know everybody wants to say the locker room too, but players, unless Jack was taking dumps in their skates, like, the players don't really care.
I'll tell you, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe. I believe that to an extent now. Not to the extent how fans and people on Twitter might make it seem like Jack felt about the Sabres or other players felt about him. But I don't know, man. When he came back to Buffalo and the interview after the game, that combined with, I don't know, just it seemed like the attitude changed when he left. And I was a big Jack defender. You remember last year on the podcast how many times I did. I do think there's some validity that, as talented as he is, maybe addition by subtraction by getting him out of here. And for whatever reason, if he didn't want to be here, he was disgruntled with management, the team itself. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, he was not happy, it seemed, in Buffalo. Then maybe getting him out of here and whatever attitude he carried with him, that alone was kind of a net positive for the Sabres, as talented as he is. And he's one of the best players in the league.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, think about what the timeline was, that we learned after the fact. Obviously, was after that last full season with Ralph. Jack wanted out. Jack went to Adams. After Adams fired Bottrell, and they swept out everybody. They cleaned house. Jack was just like, listen, I see where this is going. I don't want to hang out for this. This is bad. And Adams, was new to the job, and he just had to fire like 20 whatever people and start looking for new coaches and all that stuff. So he, his docket was already full. Then Jack comes to him and says, listen, I ain't hanging around for this. This sucks. Like I can see you're already starting to rebuild again. This is like the second time already while I've been here. Like no, I ain't got the time for that. Like you guys have already pissed away 6-7 years of my career. It's time. Time's got to change here. And Adams was like, listen, we'll try to get this figured out for you. You know, we'll do what we can. But we'll look for a deal. We'll keep our ears open, keep our eyes open, and listen and look for what's out there. But we're not actively going to try to move you because we got to see what we can figure out here. Jack was like, okay, yeah, whatever. I'm along for the ride. And then they go out and I don't know. I think Terry twisted Kevin's arm into getting Taylor Hall because I think that was a move they wanted to make, or maybe Jack wanted them to make a couple of years before. Was like, hey, listen, man, we need a guy. Let's go get Taylor Hall in here. And then they didn't make that move. And then, Taylor Hall becomes available again. And it's kind of like, hey, let's make up for that mistake we made last time, make Jack really happy and get Taylor Hall in here. And then everything they did that offseason backfired on them horrendously. So you can just chalk that all up to just being like, all right, this ain't going to work. This ain't going to work for anybody anymore ever again. So, it was, time was up for Sam. Time was up for Jack. Time was up for, Risto was, Risto had been asking for a trade for like the last two or three off seasons, and they were just kind of like, all right, man, whatever, you're still coming back. It's fine. But yeah, like you get to that point sometimes where it's done. Like you just got to move past it. And if you try to hang on to it, things can get so much worse. Things can get so much worse, so much faster. So that's why, the fact that he asked for a trade the year before, the neck injury even happens and all that stuff, like, it makes all the stories check out in the end, obviously, because why would the team agree to a surgery, risky surgery, granted, didn't turn out to be very risky in the end, but like the team was like, dude, you asked for a trade last year. We're not hooking you up with this crazy surgery. We're just not doing that.
Right.
Like that's what it came down to. So, that's what, all the PR, reaching for the stars that happened before that, where it's like, oh man, poor Jackie's getting screwed by the team. It's like, no, he told the team he wanted out. So the team's just like, dude, we're like, yeah, we know it sucks. Your neck's broke, or you got a bad neck or whatever, but you want this crazy ass surgery, dude? We're not doing that. Like, sorry, man. If we can find you a team that'll do it for you, but like, we ain't doing that. Sorry.
One of the points that you make, and I think it's an excellent point as well, is when you're evaluating these trades, it's not necessarily even so much about like on the ice for those 60 minutes per game, if they're working out. It's other factors as well. Like with Sam Reinhart, for an example. Now, Devin Levi very well might become the Sabres' number one goalie in this organization. It certainly appears early on that he's on that track to become that. He's going to have every opportunity, that's for sure.
Right.
And, who knows about Yuri Kulik, but regardless, my point was this: Sam Reinhart, he was never going to, if they didn't trade him and get Devin Levi, was Sam Reinhart ever going to sign a 6-7 year extension and stay with this team?
No.
Right.
No. They blew two other opportunities to do that before. And at that point, Sam's just kind of like, dude, you guys can't figure, you guys don't hear your ass from a hole in the ground. He's like, I'm out. Like,
so if you're evaluating Kevyn Adams, you have to factor that in. He has a player in Sam Reinhart was not going to stay here long term. He had a player in Jack Eichel did not want to be here. So he got to force his hand to make the trade. So you kind of got to judge that as well when you look at these trades and say, all right, now if you take the process completely out of it, because we don't know what Oslin's going to be, we don't know what Kulik's going to be.
We don't know what any of these guys are going to be.
Right, exactly. I don't want to completely take Devin Levi out of it, though, because I'm pretty confident he's going to become the number one goalie. Rosine, take him completely out of it. Just in the players they got back alone. Tuck, we know Tuck is a good player.
Yeah.
Hayden Krebs is a pretty good player, and he might be a lot better in the future. And I really like Devin Levi. I think now, with plenty of time to evaluate these trades, I actually think Kevyn Adams did a pretty damn good job, all things considered.
Yeah. And, I look at the Florida trade, they get the draft pick that gets him Kulik. To me, Kulik is my favorite pick from the draft. Not because I don't like Savoy and I don't like, Ostlund. But I think Kulik was a guy that probably could have gone a bit higher than 28. He probably could have gone, between 15 and 20, maybe. I'm not gonna say he could have been a top 15 guy, but pretty close. Going back to that original like quarterback argument, like
he was higher than
yeah,
Ostlund on some pre-draft rankings that I looked at after the Sabres draft him. So you're right, yeah,
absolutely. And people got spooked by the points that he put up in the Czech the Czech Pro League, saying like, oh man, this guy doesn't score any points. Like, well, he's 17 playing against guys like Jaromir Jagr. Like, what do you expect? That's that's gonna happen. But like the dude lit it up against his peers, so be pretty eager. Like, I mean, if he plays in the Czech Pro League again this year, okay, fine. But I'd rather see him play junior hockey, see what he can do against his peers, because I want to see what that looks like. I seen him against men. Like, that's a great way. It's a great way to learn. But like, your minutes are going to be kind of hampered sometimes, and you might not get the amount of ice time that you should be getting at that age. Like, that's what happened to Rosine. That's why Rosine came over, basically. But evaluating Kulich and evaluating Levi, like getting Levi as part of that trade made sense. Like, get another goalie, like you need one. And they got a guy who, it's kind of like just taking a lottery ticket from a team. Kind of, with goalies. I mean, he was taken in the 7th round, so obviously it's not that, not that high of a thought process there. I'm thinking, but then he broke out. He had a great World Juniors performance, and then suddenly it's like, oh,
credit them for scouting.
This guy's a guy, maybe. Okay. And you're going from that to like, okay, well, maybe, he has, a college hockey season that we haven't seen since Ryan Miller, basically, since he was at Michigan State. And so now like expectations are really high on him. So let's see what happens. If he can put up another like 952 save percentage season, holy smokes, sign him the second their season's over with, as far as I'm concerned. Get him in, because you got to know. Because like everything points towards him being a really good goalie, but like you got to know what he looks like against better competition, against better players. Because sometimes you don't know. Like I think of Jason Kasdorf. He was a great college goalie at RPI. Super. Had a pretty rough injury. Had like red shirt one year. But he wasn't the same after the injury. Like, he still put up some pretty decent numbers. He was still like above 900 by 910, 920. Still was really good. But the second they got him against pro competition, couldn't hack it. You've got one start in Buffalo, and then, it was a rough game, bad Buffalo team, whatever, fine. But like, he couldn't get it done at Rochester. He couldn't get it done at Cincinnati. So like, you gotta temper expectations with goalies almost all the time. Obviously, the hype on Levi is it's earned right now, but to immediately start writing in ink like this guy's going to be our number one goalie in 2024, I wouldn't do that yet.
Right?
I got to see what he can do against pros first.
I'll tell you, man. When you go through,
it's exciting. Like, don't get me wrong, it's exciting.
Right. When you go through all these trades, it actually impresses me the most of all the trades, all the players and prospects they got for the guys that they gave up, their big name players. That might be the most impressive is Devin Levi, because they traded for him before he went out and had that crazy season last year. So some credit to the Sabres scouting, whoever, evaluated this guy. There,
you got honked on that one, Pat.
Got honked on that one.
Take there.
But I think that Kevyn Adams deserves even more credit for that, because he went and traded. So I remember last year or so, whenever that trade was made, I first thought, was like, fucking seriously, Devin Levi? He wasn't even like this big name prospect. He wasn't like this highly touted top pick.
Oh, no, he's a 7th rounder. Like,
so I was like, I mean, and then I understood, because again, like we just talked about, I'm like, well, Sam Reinhart's not staying in Buffalo. They got to get the best they can. But I wasn't impressed. Now a year later, I'm like, shit, man, the Sabres might have themselves a legitimate, and you're right, temper the expectations for now, but they might have themselves a legitimate, really good long-term number one goalie.